I think we'd all agree. There's not many things that we all agree on. Most people want to argue about all kinds of topics today, but I think we would all agree that comparison is killing us. Literally, the next generation is being killed by comparison, and we spend so much of our time looking at devices, whether it's a tablet or an iPhone or whatever, and whether you're on Instagram or TikTok or whatever's the new one. We're scrolling through, we're looking at other people's lives, and we're determining our value based on what they are or are not doing, who they're with or who they're not with, where they're at or where they're not at, what they're driving, what shoes they have on, like all this stuff. And it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, what your religious beliefs are, what your world philosophy is. We all agree that's not good, and it's not healthy. I recently read an article, and it was talking about extended social media use, about 5 hours a day for teenagers. And for teen boys, they use social media for 5 hours a day. It increases their depressive symptoms by 35%. But listen to this, for teen girls, it's 50%. And we could talk about why and the differences between the genders, but you have to think that comparison has something to do with that. Because how can you look at somebody else's life for 5 hours a day and not compare yourself? And there are some things. Sometimes you look at people's lives and it inspires you to grow, but for the most part, it's usually not positive. That's why this study is revealing the things it's revealing. And many people have been blessed by what people like Jordan Peterson says, who to my knowledge is not a Christian. I know he talks about the Bible and talks about some different things, but is a psychologist and talks about how people work and what we think. And he challenges people, don't compare yourself to others, but compare yourself to yourself. And be better than you were the day before, which is great when you're measuring progress. And I think that's helped a lot of people. But it's devoid of any vision of the future. What is the vision for the future? And especially if you believe there's a God who has a divine plan for your life, like I do, like the Bible says is true. In Ephesians chapter 2, it says that you're God's workmanship, his poiema, his work of art. And he planned before the beginning of time a life for you to live, good deeds, light works for you to walk in. Before you even existed, before you were in your mother's womb, God had a plan for you, and it was specific to you. And then we're over here looking at all these other people's lives, and so what does the Bible have to say? What do we do? And I think if you want some eternal truth, there's a lot that's out there. And maybe if this is impacting to you, I'll do another talk and do 13 reasons why comparison's killing us and what do we do about it. But if you just want some eternal truth right now, John chapter 21 is an incredible passage of Scripture, maybe my favorite in all of the New Testament. What happens in John chapter 21 is the Apostle Peter, who's really close with Jesus, he's denied Jesus 3 times. And even though he said he wouldn't, I'll never deny you, and Jesus said, this is what's going to happen when you turn, strengthen your brothers when you turn back to me. And he gives them all, tells them, you're going to deny me before the rooster crows. And Peter does it. And it feels like a failure. And he does what many of us do when we feel like failures. He goes to old habits. He goes to an old way of life. He goes back fishing. And then Jesus calls him again. And he's there at a campfire, which is interesting. Have you ever had a smell that brings back a memory? Maybe you played football and you remember 2 days in the fall and the smell of fresh cut grass. Or maybe as a job now or growing up or at some point you did landscaping and you know the smell of gasoline. That reminds you of the morning workday, or maybe it's the smell of cookies at grandma's house or something. But you get these smells and it brings you to a place and it brings you a memory. And so Jesus has a fire, a campfire. Do you remember where Peter was at when he denied Jesus? That smell probably triggered some memories for him. And then they have this conversation. And in the conversation, Jesus asked Peter about his love. Interestingly, 3 times. And Peter denied him 3 times. And when he's done, he says, you feed my sheep. So there's the command. There's your commission. Peter, you're supposed to feed Jesus' flock, his sheep, his followers. And we know ours, as followers of Christ, is go make disciples. And you don't have to teach them everything in the Bible. You don't have to have an answer to every question, but teach them everything that Jesus has taught you. And baptize them and show them what it is to follow Jesus. And you don't have to know everything. You just got to be a little bit further along than them. And so teach them that. But what does that look like? And what do we do? And so what Jesus does next with Peter is they're walking along the beach, the Sea of Galilee, and he tells them about his life. And he tells them, in the past, this is what your life was like. And he gives them a glimpse to the future. Can you imagine having that conversation with Jesus? If Jesus were to walk you along the beach or down the street or wherever it is you go, maybe you prefer the mountains, walking the Appalachian Trail with Jesus, and he says, this is what it was like when you were a little kid, and you're like, yeah, I remember that. So let me tell you what's going to happen in the future. Can you imagine if after that moment you said, well, what about, I've been scrolling through social media here and on Snapchat or TikTok or whatever. What about Susie's? What about Joe's life? What about... That's what Peter does. There's one of their buddies, John, is walking by them, and he turns and goes, what about him? And then, can you imagine if Jesus said, what if, for Susie or John or whoever you picked, he said, what if I gave them everything that you've always wanted? What does it matter to you? It doesn't change my plan for you. So what he says to Peter is, he says, here, what if, he doesn't say this is what's going to happen, if I don't even want John to die, because you're going to die in a way you don't want to die, Peter. If I don't want John to, what is that? It doesn't change my plan for your life, Peter. He says, what is it to you? Do you know what he says then? You must follow me. Do you know the eternal truth that teaches us? We know comparison is killing us. But do you know the eternal truth? It's really hard to compare yourself to others when your eyes are on Christ. Comparison is killing us. But if we could fix our eyes on Christ and follow him, well, that would change our lives. How many lives would that save? How many people would be experiencing, in this world we have trouble, but be experiencing joy? Comparison is killing us. But when your eyes are fixed on Christ, it's really hard to compare yourself to others.